There are a few more books here that I wanted to talk about. Don't know if there's going to be time, but I'll just quickly recommend them as we fly by. One is 84 Charing Cross Road. This is a great, beautiful book by Helene Hanff, and she was a New Yorker who fell in love with the bookstore run by this guy's father, Marx and Company. Marx and Cohen, actually, was what it is, in a bookstore here in London. And it's just a series of her letters asking for this or that special book that she wanted. And then she started, because it was there was rationing going on in London. This was the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. And she would send, I don't know how she did this, hams and dozens of eggs just by regular mail, which was pretty odd. Anyway, to people who worked in the bookstore, because she thought, well, they must be really hungry. Anyway, this is a book by a writer who's going to be here in the boat in July, Geoff Dyer, and an incredible book about a room. So if you're interested in the Room for London project, this is a really great book to read. I'm going to just talk a little bit about a couple more nautical things before we... I wanted to do a little bit of music as well, but before that, I wanted to talk about a project that I did, an opera based on Moby Dick. If you have any ideas of doing an opera based on a book that you love, don't do it. It's sort of really misguided, I found. I mean, I fell in love with this book because Melville is like a master of the jump cut, for one thing. And I love stories that just can go from here to there to there to back. So, for example, this book starts out, I think I'd like to go to sea. But if I went to sea, what would I do? I mean, I could be a captain, but I don't like bossing people around. I could be like a first mate, but don't really like swabbing the decks. I could be a cook, because I love roast chicken. I mean, who doesn't love roast chicken? I mean, the Egyptians liked roast chicken. You can tell by their mummies of roasted river horse and chicken in their giant bakehouses, the pyramids. We're on like page 3 of this book at that point. So this is a book that can, go from here to there, made of many, many tiny little stories. Anyway, I love this so much of the imagery in it, and I tried to make a work. But here's the problem: I live in New York City, not far from where Melville worked in the customs office. And all the time I was working on this, I was really afraid he would come and find me and kill me. Basically this book, doesn't really need to be a multimedia opera. It's a perfectly good book as it is. So anyway, that was the my fear. Anyway, so I also, maybe you don't know this, but this book was written. The first draft of it, there was no Captain Ahab in it at all. There was so Melville took this to his editor, and I just like to imagine what he was saying at that point. Herman, I think the book is interesting. It's got some really interesting information about the sea, but basically it's kind of guys go fishing. I mean, what's the point? You need an engine. You need something pushing this thing. And how about, just a crazy captain? Why not that? So if you notice, this crazy captain doesn't show up until halfway through the book. Why? Because he wasn't written. He wasn't there. And so when he did appear, he appeared with a British accent as a kind of like Shakespearean actor in a way. He comes storming out, "Avast! What's going on?" And these American sailors are like, "Who is that?" And he was like an American Lear, really. He was this over-the-top. And what was Melville reading at the time? Of course, Shakespeare and the Bible, like a lot of writers in the 19th century. So when I was working on this opera, a friend called me up and said, I have something to loan you while you're working on this. And he brought over this big box, and inside was Melville's Bible, the Bible that Melville had while he was writing Moby Dick. And I was like, whoa. And it was filled with pencil markings and little things. And that had been erased by his wife. It was one of those marriages that, had things like that in it. Anyway, she, according to her, he was pretty much defacing the family Bible. And so my friend had gotten the Bible at Sotheby's, and he'd taken it to the FBI, and he said, tell me what's been erased here. And the people at the FBI said, well, if it had been 100 years ago, maybe we could tell you, but 150 years ago, it's too long ago. We can't tell you. So I went through this book, the Bible, with a magnifying glass, like looking for any little mention of whales, and I found them in Isaiah. There was this thing that was circled and starred, and there's this thing about, and the Lord shall pierce Leviathan, that piercing serpent that lives in the sea. Anyway, I was making this connection between the whale and the snake, and I just suddenly realized that's it. The whale is the snake, and the ocean is his garden, where he works out ideas of good and evil. So, much like the Conrad captain, in Heart of Darkness, there's something about having to go offshore or get away from where you are to, make this sort of be able to look back and make a judgment like that. So anyway, it was difficult writing this thing, as I said, for many reasons. I tried that later as well. I once wrote to Thomas Pynchon and asked if I could write an opera based. I didn't learn anything, I guess. Could I write an opera based on your book, Gravity's Rainbow? And Pynchon is a very famous recluse, and I didn't really expect to hear from him. But I got a letter from him, and he said, yes, I love your music, and I'd be really happy if you wrote an opera based on Gravity's Rainbow, and I have only one stipulation, and that is that you score the work for solo banjo. And I thought, this is like some people have the nicest way of saying, no, not over my dead body are you ever going to write an opera based on my book. Anyway, Melville didn't get the chance to say no since he was dead, but I really was. I think, when you write something about something that you love so much, you can be sometimes a little bit slavish about it, like you really hope that... So anyway, that didn't work. I want to say one more thing about captains before I'm going to play a little bit of music too. And a couple of weeks ago I saw a great show in New York. It was called Shatner's World. We Just Live in It, and it was this story of the captain of the Enterprise in Star Trek, William Shatner. No, and he was doing a one-man show, and I went to the show because he's married to my cousin, and my cousin said, "You have to come and see Bill's show." So I said, "Okay," and it turns out that he had visited our family a long time ago and gone riding, and I just had forgotten. How could you forget that the captain of Starship Enterprise is in your house? But anyway, I think that, speaking of Shakespeare, he was a kind of a little bit failed Shakespearean actor from Montreal, and was hired to do Star Trek, and he did it in a very Shakespearean way, to boldly go where others have not. He really was hamming it up a little bit too, but making a very, very grand gesture about where that ship will go and what it will do and what it will find and what you want from out there. And it was a funny show. It was just incidents from his life about being captain, and of course he's treated as if he were the captain and not just a Shakespearean actor from Montreal, so he has to keep making clear to people that he really doesn't know where we're boldly going at all. He just says their lines. One thing that he told me was he was getting a hip operation, and so in New York, I don't know if how it is here in Britain, but you have to fill out something called the Advance Directive, and the Advance Directive is your wishes for legal and medical wishes if you drop dead. So the emergency service comes and finds you dead on your floor. What do? Well, they want to use your eyes and especially your skin and things like this, but they don't know if they're allowed to, so they look for your advanced directive. Where do they look for it? In your freezer, because that's where you're supposed to put it. Because if you put your advanced directive in your desk, where's your desk? And what drawer? And what room? So, but there aren't that many documents in your freezer, probably. So you're supposed to put the advanced directive in your freezer. Now, Bill didn't know what the advanced directive was. So they said, "Mr. Shatner, what will your advanced directive include?" And he said, "Well, I would want to say not to interfere with any developing civilizations, would be my advanced directive." Anyway, he kind of reminds me of Burroughs in a funny kind of way, super dry character, and just sort of default captain, just got it in some way that was, I don't know.